This video is sponsored by Pianote. It's hard to find a rock or pop artist post the Beatles that isn't in some way inspired by the Beatles. And of course, there's nothing wrong with being inspired by an artist that came before you. That's just how new art is created. But sometimes songwriters do draw a little too heavily from the artists that came before them, to the point that it starts to cross over from innocent influence into problematic plagiarism. So today I'm going to show you 6 songs that have a clear similarity to a Beatles song, and you can let me know in the comments whether you think the songwriter is ripping the Beatles off or just wearing their influences on their sleeve. In 1999, it didn't take long after the Offspring released their single Why Don't You Get a Job for listeners to start pointing out its likeness to a classic Beatles tune.
Sail away, yeah, no way. Life goes on. Why don't you get a job? Life goes on.
Why Don't You Get a Job has a clearly similar upbeat rhythm to the Beatles track Obla-Di Obla-Da, but what makes it sound most similar to the Beatles tune is the melody. Both melodies have near identical rhythms and contours, and in addition they're both accompanied by similar chord progressions. When I say that the melodies have similar contours, it means that they go up and down in the same places, although it should be noted that whereas the Offspring melody climbs up the first 3 notes of the major scale, Obla-Di's melody instead climbs up a major triad, so the notes 1, 3, 5 of the scale, not 1, 2, 3. So they're both climbing up in the same way, but climbing up different notes. Although the press at the time made a big deal about how similar the Offspring song was to the Beatles song, almost 25 years later now there's been no legal repercussions for the Offspring using a similar melody to the Beatles. A band that no one will be surprised lifted from a Beatles song is Oasis. Little moments of Beatle influence can be found throughout Oasis's back catalogue, but perhaps the Oasis song to most overtly borrow from a Beatles song is She's Electric. The chorus of She's Electric is very similar to that of While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
And I want you to know I got my mind made up now. I don't know why nobody told you.
The 2 melodies and places are note for note the same. And While My Guitar Gently Weeps isn't the only Beatles song that Oasis channeled in She's Electric. The outro of She's Electric seems to be a direct reference to the outro of With a Little Help from My Friends.
Little help from my friends, with a little help from my friends.
The song White Ferrari by Frank Ocean has a moment in its melody that is lifted from a Beatles melody. The first time we hear it, it might not be that obvious which Beatles song has been referenced.
That was my part of the deal.
But on the second verse, Frank Ocean makes it quite clear that this is an intentional reference to the Fab Four by literally quoting the exact same Beatles lyric.
Spending each day of the year, making each day of the year.
The 1996 song Indus by Australian duo Dead Can Dance has some clear melodic similarities to the Beatles song Within You Without You. Reportedly, Dead Can Dance didn't intend on copying the Beatles' melody, and claim they weren't even that familiar with the Beatles' song. Even if Dead Can Dance weren't that familiar with the Beatles' song though, it does seem that they have at least subconsciously copied the Beatles' melody, perhaps being drawn to the melody because Indus uses similar Indian instrumentation as Within You Without You. After noticing the similarities, Dead Can Dance did contact George Harrison, who gave permission for the melody to be used. However, George Harrison's publisher did insist that he also be credited as a co-songwriter on the track, presumably meaning that George Harrison was paid a royalty for the song. Pianote is an online interactive resource for learning how to play the piano. You might already be familiar with Pianote's YouTube channel, but they also have an excellent online service where you can access tons of exclusive videos and resources to help you not only learn songs, but develop skills which you can then apply across your playing. Pianote have a massive library of classic songs that you can learn, and the best thing is that when you're learning from the sheet music, it's synced to the original record to help you work out where you are in the song. And you can even adjust the speed of the playback, add a metronome, and create practice loops to help you master particularly tricky sections. Also, a subscription to Pianote gives you full access to their sister services Drumeo, Guitario and Singio, making it really good value for money. To learn more about Pianote, follow the link in the description and do consider subscribing to their YouTube channel. Many people have noticed before a likeness between Radiohead's song Karma Police and the Beatles song Sexy Sadie.
This is what you get. This is what This is what you get.
This similarity largely comes down to a consistent chord progression used in both songs. This chord progression is quite rare, so the fact that both songs use it certainly draws attention to any other similarities they have, such as a similar instrumentation or tempo. Both tracks also feature a piano arpeggio over the G and F sharp chords, and although these arpeggios are not identical, they are quite similar. It's hard to say whether Radiohead were consciously inspired here by Sexy Sadie. Personally, I never noticed the similarities between these two tracks until recently when some commenters here on YouTube brought it to my attention. At most, I would say the likeness is just a bit of Beatles' influence shining through in Radiohead's songwriting, and not considerable enough to be judged as plagiarism. And the last example of lifting from a Beatles song that we'll look at today is also one where I would consider it very much in the realm of quoting the Beatles rather than copying the Beatles. The Bad Religion song You features some quite clear references to the Beatles. Not only do they directly quote the Beatles song We Can Work It Out, but their use of the lyric Maybe I'm Amazed is probably also a nod to Paul McCartney's solo track Maybe I'm Amazed. So that's all the songs that I could think of that have a clear similarity to a Beatles song, but if you think I've missed a song that clearly rips off a Beatles classic, then do let me know in the comments. If you didn't already know, I'm now regularly streaming over on Twitch, where I'm doing all sorts, including holding Beatles quizzes, listening to your music, improvising at the keyboard, and counting down my favourite songs. So do consider following me on Twitch to stay up to date with when I'm streaming.